I was just a fan of rock and roll music. It was actually a student-run station in the area where I grew up in Northern California. It was run by high school students, and there were a few college students there too. But it was on the campus of a high school, and they had a hard rock, kind of heavy metal format, which is really cool. This is like late 80s, early 90s. They played, yeah, some, like Motley Crue and Def Leppard, lots of that stuff, Metallica. Guns N' Roses, really cool radio station. So I listened to it a lot, and I heard the high school kids doing it. And I'm thinking to myself, these are high school kids. These are 16, 17-year-olds. But I was thinking to myself, I was 13, 14, a few years younger, like, well, I can do that. And so the first chance I got to get into that radio station, I did. My first air shift at the student-run station, I was 18 years old. I was just right out of high school. My first commercial air shift, the first time I got paid to do it, that was in May of 1999 in San Francisco, my first shift. It was Sunday morning, 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. I was after the electronic music show on Saturday night and before the public affairs show on Sunday morning. So 3 a.m. to 6 a.m., great time to make mistakes and, and try to figure things out. The first album I ever bought, this is a good one. I love having this conversation with people because I'm really proud of my first purchase. It's, I was 5 years old, and it's one of the best-selling albums of all time, maybe the best, I'm not quite sure, but Thriller, Michael Jackson. It was, and I think one of the reasons it sold so well is because you could find copies of it everywhere. I got my first copy of Thriller on cassette at Toys R Us. So yeah, I had a couple of records before that, like children's stuff, and like Star Wars soundtrack, the original Star Wars soundtrack, John Williams, good stuff. But the first album I remember going to the store to pick out myself was Thriller from Michael Jackson. That's good stuff. The last album I bought, it's been a little while because, especially since I started doing the new music show, The Big Beat, I mean, you get so many records for free, so I'm always trying to stay on top of all the stuff that gets sent to me. So I'll say the last record I spent tons and tons of quality time with is A Deeper Understanding from the War on Drugs. I love this stuff. I've seen it described as heartland synth rock, some late, 80s Dylan influence in there, some power ballads, stuff like that. I'm just a sucker for it. So yeah, The War on Drugs, A Deeper Understanding, I highly, highly recommend that one. This is, totally subjective, right? Musical taste, like what you're into is what you're into. I would say, for me, if you like classic punk rock, I mean, you maybe already have it, but Pink Flag from Wire, 1977, it's my favorite punk album. Never, ever, ever have I begun to get sick of this record. I've listened to it a gazillion times, and every time I hear it, because it's so easy to get burned out on stuff, you're a music junkie, you gorge on things, and you listen to stuff over and over and over again. But yeah, Pink Flag from Wire, I've never gotten sick of that one. Also, from the same year, 1977, Trans-Europe Express from Kraftwerk. I remember hearing that for the first time, and it was just, it was mind-blowing. I mean, just the artists that they influenced, how they influenced music, what came after them, it's hard to wrap your head around, but Trans-Europe Express, Kraftwerk is just an amazing listen every time. First concert that I went to, it was 1992, the fall of 1992. It was Ozzy Osbourne, Alice in Chains, and Blind Melon. Motorhead was supposed to be on the bill, but I think Lemmy got sick. Too many Marlboro Reds, Jack Daniels, I'm not quite sure what it was. But yeah, Motorhead dropped out. Blind Melon was last minute fill-in. And so I tell people, the three bands I saw at my first concert, two of the three lead singers have passed away, and the third one seems to defy all logic, all laws of nature and everything. Ozzy Osbourne's still going strong. But that was a good show. Lane Staley from Alice in Chains actually had a broken leg and did the show on a crutch, and then the songs he played guitar, they brought a wheelchair out for him, and he played that way. But it was really, really, really loud. I was 14 years old, and my ears rang for a little while. I think my dad took me to the show. He sat way up high at the Oakland Coliseum Arena, and I was down low. Get away from me, Dad. But I think his ears rang longer than mine. But yeah, that was a good one. Oh wait, that was Ozzy's farewell tour, 1992. That was 25 years ago. I would have to say running it, actually hanging out with Joe Montana back in 2000. I was working at a radio station in San Francisco, and we put on a big summertime concert at the big amphitheater down there. I think the one in Tinley Park, it's like that. But we had multiple stages. We had bands playing all day. And we're introducing bands. As one of the DJs, we bring a few bands on throughout the day. And one of the bands I bring on is Third Eye Blind, Bay Area band. And on stage with me to introduce the band is Joe Montana. Joe Montana had called the radio station. He had teenage daughters at the time. They really wanted to go to BFD. That was the name of the festival. And we said, yeah, we'd love to set your daughters up backstage, the whole thing. But we ask if you would please introduce a band with one of our DJs. He said, no problem. And I was the biggest football fan there by far. I grew up a 49ers fan. So he shows up at the festival. They introduce me to him. And I'm having a beer, and I'm the only one that he knows there. So he's just kind of like hanging out with me, like, hey, Jason, we're just talking, BSing and stuff like that. And I had a bunch of other things to do. So I had to like tell Joe Montana, like, hey, Joe, I got some stuff I need to take care of. Just hang out here. I'll be back in a second. Like, cool. But we introduced the band. It was fun. He gave me an autographed jersey, authentic 80s 49er Wilson jersey. And he autographed it to the voice that rocks, signed it Joe Montana. I still have it at home. It's amazing. So yeah, that was a good one. I think that's tough to beat. Most memorable interview for being bad was Cheap Trick on this stage right here. I don't want to get into that right now. But an interview I really enjoyed was back in 2004. Again, I was working in a different radio station. I was in San Francisco. But Kings of Leon were in town, and I believe they were touring on their second record, Aha, Shake, Heartbreak. And Nathan and Jared came by the radio station, and we hung out. I had them on the radio. Jared was, I don't know, 16, 17 at the time. He was a kid. And Nathan, they were just a blast to talk to. They were just taking it all in, just country boys from the South that were kind of doing this whole touring the world as a badass rock band for the first or second time. And they were so much fun to talk to. It was just like being on the radio with buddies goofing around. I think we were drinking beer maybe. But yeah, early Kings of Leon, they were really fun to talk to. Snowboard. I like snowboarding. Being in the mountains out west. I grew up out west, and I skied when I was a kid and discovered snowboarding later on. But pretty much any vacation time that I have, I'm snowboarding out west. That's the winter months. In the summer, I try to play golf. I'm okay. I guess I'm better than your average person, but I still think I suck. So if you have an addictive personality, or you can really sort of zone in on having a project and working hard at something and like to keep your mind busy, golf is a pretty good way to do it. Best thing about Chicago, I would say affordability. That sounds crazy, like if you grew up in Iowa or like, downstate Illinois, but I grew up in the Bay Area in San Francisco, so anything else is cheap. But that was one of the first things I noticed when I came here. It's a big city, tons of music clubs, everything is going on. They have everything here, and you can afford to live in a cool neighborhood. That was totally foreign to me after working in San Francisco 7 years before moving here. People are really friendly. The food is awesome. The bar scene is great. Neighborhood bars. The first people I met when I moved to Chicago, they were bartenders. And I joke with people. I say, it took me 3 or 4 years to realize, like, you can say no to a shot once in a while. That's totally fine. Nobody's going to think less of you. But once I figured that out, it was a little bit better for my body, and I wasn't quite hungover as often. But yeah, so many good bars in Chicago, great people working those bars, great people attending, patronizing those bars. Yeah, I was a big bar guy when I moved here, not so much anymore, but yeah, bars, restaurants, music clubs. I love riding my bike around town. Although it's a little sketchier now with Uber drivers from the suburbs wanting to be taxi drivers in the city. That gets a little sketchy, and of course everyone's glued to their phones now. It's tough. I know how it is. But there's a couple of things you have to fight being on your bike in the city. But yeah, I discovered that in Chicago, riding my bike everywhere, riding my bike to work, and I love it. I still do it. Rode my bike here today. I'm a family man. No, I've mentioned my son a few times on the radio. I'm married. I have a 2-year-old. So yeah, most of my time when I'm not at work is devoted to my family and making sure everything's cool at home. So you don't really talk about that on the radio too much, but yeah, that would be one thing. If you listen to my radio show every day, I've mentioned being a dad once or twice, but that surprises some people when I tell them that. My advice for the next generation, like kids growing up, I have no idea. I mean, I've seen how much the world has changed in the last 10 years. Like the way we consume music, the way we consume media, the way everybody's just walking around glued to their phones. That wasn't like that 10 years ago. So what are things going to be like 20, 30 years from now? I have no idea. I don't know. Try to experience as many things as you possibly can. Trying new things and exposing yourself to new things. That can never, ever, ever be bad. Worst case scenario, you try something new and it sucks. It's like, well, hey, you know it sucks. You don't have to do it ever again. But living in your bubble and doing the same things over and over again, it's tempting. We find things that we're comfortable with. We get into a groove. But getting out of your groove, making yourself uncomfortable once in a while, trying new things. That would probably be my advice. Try as many new things as possible.